For a long time, we've been talking about which hang-on back filter is the king, the AquaClear or the Tidal. Now, I've had the Tidal in multiple tanks, or I guess on multiple tanks, for about 3 years now. So it's time to do a long-term review on this guy, the Tidal. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today we're going to do a long-term review on the Tidal series of filters by Seachem and Sicce. It was 3 years ago that I did my first review on one of these, right? But, you know, I've had the 110s and the 75s in use on a number of different tanks, and I've had AquaClear 110s, AquaClear 20s, AquaClear the 50, the 70. I've done pretty much every AquaClear. So we can talk a little bit about long-term, whether this checks up with the kind of original review that I did. And I'll link that so you can walk through all the parts. We're not going to go as in-depth, but let's talk about it. I have this Tidal 75 that I was using on one of my Pleco tanks until the pump died on me. Now the pump's repairable, so I'll be getting it fixed, but I want to talk about some of the things that I both love and hate about this filter. And you can totally tell just by here, like it's been used, it's seen its fair share, right? I don't have the lid on right now, but that's fine. One of the best things, honestly, is this guy. And a lot of people will say that the tray is one of the negatives. And let me explain. I'll pull it out while we're talking about it. Because of the tray design, one, it's a little weird. I'm not really sure why they specifically have this cutout notch and didn't just design it to go completely open. I know it has to do with like how the internals are designed, but maybe just make the back a little bit bigger and make it flat. But because of this design here, because it does have to go through these intakes at the bottom of the tray, the way the water flow works, you can get some bypass that comes along the back of the tray. And specifically, you can see these fins here to leave a little bit of a gap so that bypass can occur. Now, most people see this as a massive negative. There are a lot of people out there like, oh, the bypass is horrible. There's no water going through it. You're not getting actual filtration. Bull. You still have water going through your filter media. Why this is present is so that if this does get too clogged, you don't have like your filter media inside starting to float up like you will see in the AquaClear. It allows some water to go through while you're still getting some water flow through here. Now, there's also, on the Tidal, when you're looking at the lid, and I don't have a lid right now, but over here, there's a little like nodule that pops up from the top of the lid, right? There's that little thing to tell you that flow is slowed down and you need to clean the filter. That doesn't always work perfectly. To be honest, I know that I have a filter behind me in my Pleco breeding tank that is in need of a cleaning this weekend. It is got some gunk in it. I've been dealing with a couple of different things in that particular tank, a hair algae outbreak, and they generate a lot of mold in general because it's Plecos, they make a mess. And there's a big piece of wood that's slowly but surely getting rasped on and turning into more mold, all those kind of things, right? That clogs that filter up quite a lot, so I have to service that filter more regularly. But because of the tray and lid design, where the tray literally snaps into the top of the lid and kind of acts as a drip tray for you, servicing those are actually really easy and really fast. Not the case with the AquaClear in the sense of, yes, you can service it very quickly, but you have this big open kind of tray system, and water will kind of go everywhere. It's a really minor flaw between the two. This is just basically when you've been a filter that's been out there and been good for 25, 30 years like the AquaClear has, there's room to innovate a little bit, right? If I were to look, the little indicator that says like, hey, you need to clear this is kind of just barely popped up. Sometimes it will pop up if you put too much media in the basket and it reduces flow some. And if you don't adjust the flow rate for the pump on your tank, on your hang-on back, then it'll push that up because it's looking for some of that bypass to occur to tell you that, hey, too much water flow is coming over here, not where it's supposed to go. You need to clean this thing. So there's positives there. It's got this little indicator that helps you know, like, you need to clean your filter, as if other things aren't obvious. But I think the biggest elephant in the room, as far as a negative is concerned, is right here, the skimmer front. Now, there's two great things about this. One, now because of the design, the pump sits right here, right? It's in this little housing that goes inside the tank, right? This is on the back of your tank. This goes in your tank. So if you have a power outage or something like that, it's always going to fire up and push water immediately up. You don't have to worry about how some AquaClears, not all, but some, will not be able to basically establish their flow. They'll fire back up and they'll try to pump, but they won't be able to reestablish movement without you putting excess water in the back of the containment unit. Now, here's the thing. That's great if you deal with power outages, but this grate here, when it starts getting blocked, because it doesn't have enough flow coming through where this is the primary source of water flow, there is some grate underneath here, and then your tube, mine's missing right now, but don't worry about that, right? But this can be blocked off. If you, can the camera see that? You can see, you can block this entirely off. So you can literally run without this portion and only on these little grates here, and the primary skimmer here, which is doing most of the work. If this gets blocked, say you've got some leaf litter, some hair algae, or whatever that blocks this up, or the water level gets too low and not enough flow is coming through the skimmer portion, this pump makes a very loud sucking noise. And it's one of the things that most people hate the most about this filter. It is obnoxious for a lot of people, and also because of the way that it is designed, a lot of people don't like it, because if you're trying to breed fry or you're expecting fry in a tank, fry can get into this portion right here, and now they're in the filter and they're going to get sucked up in the pump or some other problem, right? Not good. That's the biggest downside. And there's not really a way to fix this portion. Honestly, I wish there was a version of the Tidal that still had the pump in here so that water level is naturally going to come up, but had a way to block this off. If you could block this portion off, then it would be really easy to prevent that noise and keep your flow going, and you'd probably have a significantly better filter in many cases than almost any other hang-on back that's out there. You have ease of maintenance. There's a good amount of room, even though a lot of people don't like this design and they'll see this container and think that it's very skinny. Because it's so tall, you can actually fit a decent amount of media in this thing. Now, realistically, you might just be better off buying excess sponges. You can buy the pre-cut sponges that fit into this relatively cheap and just fill it with that. But most of us use like a ceramic media or something like that. I like having one or two sponges, a little bit of ceramic media, and a little bit of crushed coral in mine because my water is super soft, so I need crushed coral to help buffer it up. The question becomes, how much testing did they do with an average aquarist who maybe only does a water change once a week and they have a reasonable amount of evaporation because they keep their tank warm, and then you get toward the end of the week and you start hearing that noise coming out of that pump. Right? It's noisy. It's obnoxious. I deal with it all the time in my Pleco tank that's right here. And this is like my living room where my TV is. So my TV is that way. And, you know, it gets noisy and obnoxious. And sometimes if you're dealing with like a hair algae outbreak, you've got to literally clean that grate off. And it's not the water level. It's just stuff getting in its way, causing those problems. There's a lot of ways that this can become a nuisance. You don't really deal with that with the AquaClear. Typically, because of the way that it's designed, it only has the intake through its tube. And as long as you are taking care of that, that pump's really not noisy. Now, what you can run into over time, and this is very common because of the impeller design that is used on the AquaClear, is as they get a little older, they get noisier. But they don't get as loud as when that water level is low or something's blocking that strainer. So I think that's the biggest flaw in this filter. If you're not maintaining it enough and you're getting a ton of bypass, one of the things you can also do is the lid itself on the top is vented and along the backside. So you're gonna forgive me, I don't have a spare lid. along this side here, right, there's vents in the top of the lid. And if you do have water bypass occurring because you need to clean your filter, and you have it at a high flow rate, you don't dial that flow rate down, which is one of the ways that you minimize that bypass, by the way. You can get little bits of water that come up through the top and slowly settle along the top of the lid. And then over time, if you're not paying attention, that lid will spill onto your carpet or spill onto your stand or whatever, and that might freak you out. Now, the easy way to fix that is you just dial the flow rate down a little bit. The dial that's literally right here on the very front, you just dial it down. You don't have it at max. Easy peasy, fixes the problem immediately. But if you don't know that, and you find out about it later, or maybe you can't see your filter very well so you don't realize that's occurring, it could cause all sorts of problems, because you could have some water drip down power cables if you haven't ran your power cables very well, and maybe that's going to cause a problem. You don't want to like fry your circuitry or anything like that. Just, all the kind of problems that are water plus electricity, right? So keep that in mind. One of the things, you probably don't want this at maximum flow the entire time unless you're really on top of servicing this filter. And I mean, like, similar to the Oase pre-filters, if servicing this thing like once a week, just to make sure that the sponges aren't getting clogged up and things like that. Now, granted, if you're servicing that regularly, it's very fast. The sponges that come with it aren't like super fine, so you can clean them out pretty quick. You literally just keep your media in a thing of tank water or whatever, and then you just clean up the sponge, throw it back on there. Maybe you got an intake sponge that you're worrying about, whatever your choice is on the tube there. But because you can't completely cover the intake of the tube and have that be the only point of water entry like you could with an AquaClear, intake sponges aren't as effective on this particular filter because you have to worry about that open strainer portion. Now, there's some people that have rigged some crazy stuff up, do not get me wrong, but in order to hold it in place easily, you would have to have some kind of zip tie or something that you're undoing regularly, and that's not great. So I think this is part of the design where, for those of us who like to kind of hot rod our filters, filter intakes, extra media, all that kind of stuff, that's where I think, honestly, the AquaClear is a significantly better filter, because there's a lot of small things that Sicce and Seachem are doing for the overall design of making this thing run at optimal capability. But over time and with maintenance, and when you get little bits of particulates that get stuck in places, these can lead to some inefficiencies in the filter that I think if you're a hot rodder, the AquaClear is just better for it because it's simplistic. There's only one place for the water to come in, so you can put an intake sponge on top of it. You can minimize the amount of gunk getting into the back of it and minimize some of your work, where you can't really do that on the Tidal. Now, one thing to keep in mind, the Tidal 35 is designed completely different than the 55, 75, and 110. It does not have the little intake tube, and it basically relies 100% on the skimmer. So you have to treat it almost like a completely different filter. And there's a few other small differences in the design. So keep in mind that this applies to the bigger version. So the 55, the 75, and the 110. The 35 is completely different, and honestly, because of its design differences, I don't want to touch it. I also don't use a lot of smaller tanks that would benefit from that. I benefit from larger filters. So let's talk about the tube, right? AquaClear has a system where they have these short tubes and they can stack on top of each other, right? Sicce and the Tidal have a singular tube, but it has a little extension, right? So it has a slide lock, basically, that you can extend all the way out to get like similar length of tube to what you would get in an AquaClear, but it's all in one unit and it compresses down and all that kind of stuff. This is a pretty good design, and it's pretty handy, but I will say that because of the way it's designed, and maybe it's part of the Tidal being a newer filter in comparison, there's not a lot of replacement parts. So if you happen to lose that tube, you're SOL. You got to figure out some other thing, because it's not as large as the AquaClear. So it's not like you could take an AquaClear tube. You could probably figure out some PVC that would fit in there and do something, but it's just not as straightforward as it would be with the AquaClear. The biggest benefit I think the AquaClear has, because it has been around for so long, you can buy literally every part of that filter individually as a replacement part. motor, the impeller, the case, the lids, the tubes, the actual like rack that holds the filter that goes inside of it, that holds all your filter media, the sponges, everything that can go into that filter stock that the AquaClear normally has, you can buy as an individual part. You cannot do that with the Tidal. I got a used Tidal from a friend a while back, and it was missing a couple pieces. It was missing the tube, it was missing a lid, and it was missing the little the leveler, right? That I think is one of the best designs, little screw off piece that goes against the glass of the tank to hold it flat, right? And I think that's actually a significantly better improvement over the AquaClear's like little weird janky thing. But you can even buy that weird janky thing for an AquaClear on its own. You cannot get that for the Tidal, at least not at time of filming this. There's some spare parts you can get, but really not much. You can get extra sponges and other things to go inside of it. But as far as all the individual parts are concerned, you're actually limited on the number of things that you can buy. So if you lose something, you break something, you buy one used and it's missing something because you're going to save yourself a few bucks, you might be completely strung up with no parts. And that sucks. That's a bad feeling. I think it's one of the things that Tidal could do better, that Seachem and Sicce could do better, is make all those parts available as easily as, Hagen does the AquaClear. Make all of the parts available. As long as your use case makes the Tidal a almost equivalent or potentially better filter, then the Tidal will just be the better filter. But if you're trying to minimize the number of places water can come from so that you can use like intake media or intake sponges and things like that to extend out how often you have to service it, the AquaClear is going to beat you every time. If you pick up a used one and you need to replace something, the AquaClear is going to beat you every time because you can always find AquaClear parts. You can't find Tidal parts. There's a few, but not many. Now, where I think the biggest difference is, if you're really immaculate about keeping your tank in good shape, you service your filters super often, maybe it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, depending on what your fish load is and all those kind of things. If you're really diligent about that, then here is the biggest difference, as far as I'm concerned, that matters between choosing a Tidal or an AquaClear. And where I think often the Tidal is the better filter. Flow. Because of the way that this filter is designed, right? You have a shorter run of the output of water. On the AquaClear, which is a bigger filter overall, it runs the entire length, basically, of the front of that filter with only a minimal area that it's not the output. So it creates kind of this big, large blade of water. It's more gentle flow in a tank. It's still good flow rate. The Tidal is a little bit more flow, but not by a ton. However, because it's more spread out, the water rate coming in is a little more gentle, unless you let your water level start dipping down, and then it's crashing down a bit more, right? The Tidal, because it's a little more bottlenecked, has significantly more flow output and can create more water movement, if that makes sense. So if you're really looking to have good flow and agitation and gas exchange at the top water level of your tank, the Tidal is actually significantly better at causing that than an AquaClear is. If you're doing plecos or something like that, the Tidal does a great water flow. And because it's a little easier to service faster, honestly, I think if you have a messier fish and you have to service your filter more often regularly, the Tidal, I think, is a better filter. Now, if you're trying to breed fish, AquaClear all the way. Because otherwise, you've got to do some homegrown mods, you've got to do a little DIY work, and that can be a bit of a hassle to make sure that fry aren't getting sucked up into all those extra intakes on the Tidal. I know this is not as organized as it probably could have been as far as like, here's the positives, here's the negatives. It's kind of a back and forth, a seesaw. And I think that's the important thing to think about. These filters are like this, and they edge each other ever so slightly based on what your personal needs are. Is the Tidal better than the AquaClear? Maybe. But after 3 years of use and using multiple titles on multiple tanks in all sorts of different setups, here's the biggest thing I can say about the Tidal. If your water level stays super consistent, so that you're not dealing with that noise from the intake, and you filter your service your filter regularly, maybe you only got 1 or 2 tanks, I think the Tidal is a significantly better filter in those cases. If you want to really hot rod your filter, intake sponges, excess media, things like that, and you want to prevent, if you're doing a breeding setup, you want to prevent fry from getting into that, but you want to hang on back and not sponge filters, then I would look at the AquaClear. I think it's that cut and dry. If you need the higher flow rate, maybe you've got a really long tank and you're trying to create more flow inside of that tank, or you're using multiple filters and you really want a good flow rate happening, the Tidal is a better filter for that particular use case. If you want it to be slightly more gentle but still good flow rate, the AquaClear is a better filter. But it's like this. Boop, 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 boop. Teeny tiny. So realistically, it comes down to this. What is more readily available for you, and what can you get at the best sale price? Buy that one. Seriously. The difference between the Seachem and the AquaClear is so small that unless you have really specific use cases that I've pointed out, just buy the one that you get the better deal on. If that Tidal's on sale and you're going to save like $20 compared to the AquaClear, get a Tidal. Do you already have AquaClears, or you're thinking, well, maybe I need to replace my filters? Leave your AquaClears in place. They're fine. You already have a Tidal and you're like, maybe I should go to AquaClear instead. Unless you really specifically need it for some of those use cases, just keep your Tidal going. They're so close. There's little positives to each one. Those little positives are so indifferent that if you have a kind of generic, I'm just keeping a tank full of fish, I just want a good filter, pick the one that you can get the better deal on. Can you get an AquaClear used from somebody for a steal of a deal, or you got to buy a Tidal brand new? Go buy that used AquaClear. If something goes wrong, replacement parts are easy to get. Going to buy a used Tidal? Make sure all of the parts are present, because it's very hard to get parts. That's it, gang. I would like to know your experience. Have you used the Tidal for a while? I know a lot of folks out there have tried the Tidal, or maybe you more recently have just gotten a Tidal and you've been using AquaClears in the past. I'd like to hear from you. What's your experience? What do you think is the biggest positive, negative, whatever it may be about those filters? I want to hear your feedback, your experience. Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. These are the things that are the easiest to help all of your favorite fish tubers grow, and they cost you absolutely nothing. And especially if you think this is super useful for a friend, consider sharing it. Like I said, it's the best way to help out us small YouTubers who like to talk glass boxes full of water and fish. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.